I used to work out from home, but a few years ago I got rid of all of my workout equipment. I did keep my weights and I got a gym membership. But right now, going to the gym is just not an option. I even tried to get new equipment to work out from home now, but all the local stores just are all wiped out. So with no other options, I decided to make my own gym equipment. And today I'm gonna be building a weight rack. Now there's a lot of work ahead, so if you're new here, I'm Glenn, welcome to DIY Creators. Let's do this. Before getting started, I went out and picked up this stack of lumber. These were the straightest ones I can find. I dug through my stack again and paired up the ones that I felt were the straightest together. I analyzed them, then I marked which one would be the inside part and which one would be the outside part. I then cut the ends off all of these lumber since a few of them were not straight. Now that I feel better about the ends, I can cut the boards to the final length. Originally, I wanted 4x4s, but since there were none in stock, I ended up going with 2x6 lumber, which I plan to double up. I cut the outside lumbers to length first, then I cut the inside lumbers to length. And although all these cuts are possible on a circular saw, it was quicker to do it on a miter saw. To build the frame fast, I'm going to use pocket hole joinery. This is a really quick and simple method, and I'll be able to hide these within the build. I'll be relying on this frame to do its job heavily, so I want to make sure I add wood glue wherever I can. The block of wood I clamped on the inside really helps when it comes to lining up the adjacent pieces of wood together. In a few, you'll get to see the entire picture, but you can also check out the diagram in the top right-hand corner of the video. That'll allow you to keep track of where I'm at as I'm building. Now, as I just made the attachment on the two-part previously, I want to do the same thing on the opposite end, then I'll put those together to close the frame. Now that I have one frame done, I'll repeat the same thing to finish up the second one. Once I decide which end will be the bottom of the frame, I'll install this piece of lumber to strengthen the frame. Aesthetically, I like it flushed with the side, but you can always center this up on the bottom. I'll also drive in a few screws because these will be covered up. I applied wood glue to this lumber to wrap the frame that was just constructed. Before you get too far ahead, you definitely want to check the squaring of the frame, and you can do this by measuring diagonally in X form. If both measurements have the same value, that's a great indication that the frame is squared. Now this do take a little patience, but you'll need to apply clamps to hold things together while the glue set up. For the sides, I'm relying on just wood glue and clamps. For the top and bottom, since those areas are going to be hidden, I'm going to use wood glue and also screws to shore that up. Of course, you may not have this many clamps, but you can do one side at a time, and if that's just not working for you, you can always screw these things together. If you're concerned about seeing the screws, you can always plug those with dowels. And I'll show you an example of that later on in the video, so keep an eye out for that. And now that the first frame is done, I'll have to do it all over again to finish up the second one. Originally, I was going to use zinc plated corner braces and mending plates to put this build together. I had all the hardware in front of me and I wasn't happy with what I was about to do, so I looked around the shop, then I found some steel angles that I had laying around. I set up a quick stop on a workbench and I used that to cut all the parts so that they're the same width. Yep, I decided to make my own brackets. Now I want the holes to be as uniform as possible, so I marked a line from corner to corner, and wherever they cross, that is my point to drill. So in the past, I've tried a ton of drill bits, broke a lot of them, just drilling at the wrong speed and just not the best bit for that application. Now as they say, there's always a tool for the job, and I can't recommend these bits enough. If you're drilling steel, these are the best bits I've used to date. My recommendation is set the drill to low speed and let the bit and drill do the work. Now my self-made bracket did have a bit of a sharp end on it, so I took a file and rounded those over so it felt safer. To install this bracket, this was super satisfying and felt rewarding for me. Pretty simple, just line these up, mark the holes, and drill the hole for the threaded insert. Now that I have the brackets installed, I cannot tell you how much I am digging this look. And right now I have the two frames standing up and I'm gonna connect them. I designed this so that it can easily be broken down and moved from one location to the next. So to make this possible, you will be seeing me install a lot of threaded inserts paired up with bolts. I lined up the cross brace, marked the holes, then I drilled. When drilling the holes, I like to go beyond the depth of the threaded inserts. This way, if I have to use a longer than recommended screw, I don't have to remove the threaded insert and drill deeper. Now I'll install the cross brace at the front. This one is going to be pushed up as high as possible with the bracket leveling off with the top of the frame. So now I'm going to make the pull-up bar, and this is the simplest part of the entire build. I used 2 3/4 inch steel flange, 2 nipples, 2 90s, and 1 threaded rod. I laid out the pull-up bar so that 2 of the holes were in the frame and 2 of the holes were going through the cross brace. And I like this combination because I was able to use threaded inserts and also T-nuts. So something serious have to happen here before this come crashing down. Now you can go with a T-nut or something more decorative as a connecting cap. The connecting caps are better to look at, but they do come at a higher cost. Either way, a pair of them will be installed in the cross brace. And the remaining bolts will go right into the inserts. Just do the same thing on both ends and you're good to go here. Now, of course, if I'm gonna be doing pull-ups on this, I can't have it tipping over. So I need to make like a weight storage on the back where I can put weights on it, and that will keep it anchored down. Now these frames will be as simple as can be, and to get that going, I'm gonna put pocket holes at the bottom to hold those together. Now there's no reason why you can't put this entire frame together using just pocket hole screws. Now of course you're gonna have to drill a lot of holes, a bit more work, and you're gonna have to look at the pocket hole screws unless you fill them in. Since one side of this is gonna be pressed up against the weight rack, exposed screws are gonna work out just fine here. but I don't want to see the same thing on the opposite end. So what I'm going to do is pre-drill those holes, drill a little deeper, install the screws, and then plug those holes with dowels to cover up the screw heads. You can install the dowels with wood glue, and that'll make sure they never come out. I'm just going to dry fit these, so if I ever need to take it loose for whatever reason, it's possible. I use a flush cut saw to cut them just proud of the surface, then I'll use a sander and sand that down. I'll need 2 of these frames so I can have one on each side of the weight rack. So one thing to keep in mind is the weight racks are constructed the same way, but they do face different directions. So I clamp them together facing the right direction and then mark the holes and drill them. Now this is important because remember, one side of this have the wood plugs and then the other side don't, so you'll be hiding the screws on one side but not the other. So if you take a look at me, you'll see that the wood are favoring the inside of the frame. It should be the same on both sides. So now I want to clamp this to the weight rack. Now I'll take the bolts, pass them through the hole, hammer it to mark the wood behind it. Now I can drill the hole in there and then install the inserts. I'll do this on both sides. I'll also take a washer and a bolt and pass it through the frame into the threaded insert, and that should lock in place. In order to store my weights on here, I need some sort of support bracket. I came across these steel pipes which are made for installing shelves. They are steel but decorative, so I'm not sure how they compare to the ones you find in the plumbing section. What I do know is these have a weight limit on them for 88 pounds. The plates I plan to store on here will equal to 90 pounds, which is a bit over the weight limit, but I'm not too concerned because this is super low to the ground. And most of the time that there is a weight limit on something, there is a little bit of headroom because they know it will be challenged. Overall, the quality feel the same as the steel parts I have on the pull-up bar, so not sure if it's the same or not, but the finish looks a lot better obviously. Now one thing you notice here is the pipes are installed deep within the frame, and that's for 2 reasons. One, I don't want them sticking out too far, and the other thing is if they stick out too far, I may forget and overload them. So at this point, I can only put what I said I want to put on them, which is about 90 pounds. And what I'm most excited about is being able to attach this and detach it from the frame. The weight rack is coming together, and there's an important part we need for this, and that's the barbell holder. I'm going to use plywood for this part because I think this is less likely to split versus the lumber I use for the frame. Now I doubled up on the plywood here because I want this to be as strong as possible. After gluing this and clamping it all together, I allowed enough time for the glue to set up before handling. Now I lined up these parts to the frame and clamped them in place, and I want to make sure that they're touching the ground before I drill the pass-through holes. When I drilled the holes, I made sure I staggered them, so a couple of them go on one side of the frame and then a couple of them go on the other side of the frame. Now I'm drilling through both parts at the same time. This way there will be no question whether or not the holes line up. Now the holes are in place and the threaded inserts are in place. Now I need to cut the hooks in the bar holder. This is slightly out of focus, so I apologize, but those lines are marked where I want the hooks to be. I was only planning to do 3 of these, but I added a 4th one just for the heck of it. To create a resting area for the bar, I use a small speed square, then I place one side of it on the top end of the circle. Then I pivoted the square to 15 degrees, then drew a line out. Next, I went below the circle and pivoted that to 25 degrees and drew another line out. Now, if I wanted the lines to be parallel, all I had to do was go below the circle and make another line at 15, but I want the opening to be as big as possible, but not too big. Now I can just repeat the same thing for all of them. Now I need to cut that opening out, and the most comfortable way for me to do it is by hand. The minute I'm done with this, I'm gonna take a file and sandpaper and clean that up to be as smooth and best as possible because I'm gonna use this as a template. So at this point, the template is good enough to go. Pretty simple here, I'm just gonna lay this on top of the plywood pieces that we put together for the holding bar, trace those out, flip that over, and mark the opposite one. And the reason I even trace this is because I wanna be able to take a jigsaw and cut out majority of this. This way I have less material to take off with my router bit. For this cut, I took 2 paths to remove the material. So this is when you're super thankful that you even made a template. I'm gonna use a flush trim bit, which is gonna ride along the edge of the template and cut the material below. In this case, all I'm worrying about is making sure I use the tool as safe as possible. These parts are side sensitive, so if you notice the template here, I'm showing the white side, which I'm cutting one piece of the bar holder. Now to cut part 2 of the bar holder, I'll need to flip the template over and cut that side. So as I wrap this up, I'm gonna set these off to the side so I can drill the holes for the safety bars. So now I need to drill a bunch of holes, and these need to be perfect, or as perfect as possible. I marked the location for the holes on the jig based on where I anticipate them to be, and then I drilled these out. Since the floor has a pitch to it, I needed to level this out as best as I could, and I did just that by just shimming a few things under it. I clamped the jig on, and I also added a piece of wood at the back so that when I drill through, it don't cause a blowout on the back end. Now this is not a perfect method by no means, but it's good enough for you to see a big difference. As a tip, when you're freehand drilling and you want to keep the bit straight as possible, put a wrench on the drill bit and watch the wrench. If the wrench go towards the subject you're drilling, that means you have your drill up too high. If the wrench come towards you, that means you have your drill too low. While looking at the bit, you also have to keep an eye on your side to side to make sure you're drilling as straight as possible. Again, not the perfect solution, but try drilling freehand and then try this method. You should see a difference. Now with the bit I'm using, it's a bit of a distraction to keep track of all of that while you're drilling the hole. And the reason why I say this is that this is not an ordinary bit. If you notice, I'm drilling through these holes super fast, and it's not just because I'm speeding up the video, but it's also because these bits are super fast. There's a screw tip on the bit, which is biting into the wood and helping you pull the bit through. So when you're on a construction site, this bit will blast through holes and just keep going. So if you have a drill press and a station to support something this large, it's easier to just use a drill press, obviously. Now, because I have this jig, it do help me put the holes in the same spot on each post, but it don't help me drill the hole straight all the way through. And you can still be off slightly, but in that case, you can then use a sanding drum like this here to clean out the hole. It's always a proud moment for me to hang out with my young boss, but today I get the opportunity to put her to work. She did a little bit of everything today, helping me disassemble this, sanding it down, and even becoming my camera lady. I added a slight round over on all of the holes and also on the bar holders. After selecting a few parts, black paint was applied to deliver the look I wanted. A lot of work went into this so that it could be broken down and reassembled in a matter of minutes. And this is very important because whichever space you build this in, you're not stuck with it there. I connected the two frames with the 3 braces, then I installed the pull-up bar, which also ties into the brace and the frames. Then I installed the weight storage in the back, followed by the barbell holder on the front. To wrap this build up, there's a couple more things I need to do. First, I'm going to cut down a steel bar so I can use these as a safety bar. This is a 10-foot pipe which I cut down so that I can have the threads on both ends, and then I'll just finish this off by putting on the caps. These will not be fastened, but they're long enough so they do not come out easily. To make the hook for the squat rack, I use a cap, a 90, and also a nipple. I also use a piece of PVC as a spacer. With the PVC on, I can set the proper spacing for the barbell and also have just enough thread hanging out the back to put on the cap. Just tighten it up and face the hook up. So right now I have 275 pounds of straight iron resting on the barbell holder. And the barbell holder is proven to be pretty strong, and I'll test that so you guys can see this. With me, an additional 190 pounds, I'm going to rest on this, and that's a total of 465 pounds dangling off the wood. On my best day, I can probably bench around 250. But I'm not looking to exceed 300, so I feel pretty good about working out on this. So if you like the design and you're pretty skeptical about using wood, that's fair. Consider using metal. It might take some time to cut it, but it's completely possible. This weight rack have a ton of potential, and I can definitely see some things that I can build to add on as attachment. I will be working on the bench soon, but for now I can do my pull-ups, I can do my sit-ups, I can even curl. I mean, I don't even like to squat, but of course you can do that on here as well. So as I mentioned, there was a lot of work and lots of details, but this was a super fun build, and I wish I had the bench done by now, but I'll be working on that soon, so stay tuned for that. I'm also working on plans for this, so they may or may not be out by the time I post this video, but you can always come back and check down in the video description. You should find a link there. Now I do have a few attachment ideas like a dipping station and some other things I like to add to this, so if you'd like to see other things added to this, just let me know what you want to see, and if I can incorporate those in the future videos, I would definitely do so. I have a few more videos in the work right now. I've been in the shop more than I've been in the past 6 months, so I'm super excited for some of the things that I'm going to be creating going forward. So be sure to stay tuned for that. In the meantime, be sure to check out some of my other DIYs and how-to videos. They're just like this, super detailed and step by step. So I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm Glenn, I'm out.